Some people stop texting back, and it does not hurt you the way it used to. Not because you stopped caring, but because silence finally started feeling safer than performance. You got tired of shrinking yourself just to keep a seat at somebody else's table. And somewhere in that exhaustion, being alone stopped feeling like failure. It started feeling honest. That is the part most people do not understand. They hear solitude and imagine sadness, rejection, or somebody quietly giving up on life. But selective solitude is not giving up. It is what happens when your peace becomes more valuable than random access to you. It is what happens when your nervous system gets tired of pretending noise feels normal. And if you have ever felt stronger alone than surrounded, this is probably about you. Because some people do not choose solitude out of coldness. They choose it after too many rooms made them feel invisible. After too many conversations that left them lonelier than actual silence ever did. After too many friendships built on convenience instead of real emotional safety. After too many versions of connection that demanded energy but never offered understanding. So they step back. Not dramatically. Not with some perfect speech that explains everything to everyone. They just start disappearing from places that keep disturbing their inner weather. And for the first time in a long time, their mind can breathe. That choice can look strange from the outside. People often trust constant availability more than quiet self-respect. If you are always reachable, always agreeable, always there, they call you loving. If you become more selective, they call you distant. But sometimes distance is the healthiest thing a person can create, especially when closeness has become a slow form of emotional self-abandonment. A lot of deeply thoughtful people learn this later than they should. They spend years confusing openness with obligation. They answer every message. They attend every gathering. They explain themselves too much. They keep showing up long after their body has started calling it a mistake. Then one day, something shifts. Maybe it is a betrayal that finally clears the fog. Maybe it is burnout. Maybe it is the strange grief of realizing you have been emotionally accessible to everyone except yourself. And that realization changes the air in your chest. Because selective solitude is rarely about hating people. It is usually about finally hearing yourself clearly enough to notice what drains you. It is the difference between loneliness and recovery. Loneliness says nobody is here for me. Selective solitude says I need space before I disappear inside everyone else's needs. That is why it can feel so powerful. You are not waiting to be chosen. You are choosing what deserves access to your inner life. And that is a massive psychological shift. When you grow up feeling misunderstood, you often become hyper-aware of everybody else's moods. You learn to read tension quickly. You learn how to soften yourself before conflict even starts. You learn how to anticipate disappointment and manage other people's comfort before your own. That kind of awareness can make you seem mature. But underneath it, there is often a quiet survival strategy. You were not just being kind. You were staying safe. Maybe safety meant keeping the peace at home. Maybe it meant becoming low maintenance because your feelings felt inconvenient to somebody important. Maybe it meant learning that your inner world was too much for people who preferred easy emotions. So you adapted. You became thoughtful. You became observant. You became the person who notices everything and says less than you feel. And people probably praised that version of you. They called you wise. They called you easygoing. They called you independent. But they did not always notice what that independence cost. Because some independence is not freedom. Some of it is a beautiful-looking armor. Some of it is what forms when asking for emotional safety feels riskier than going without it. That is why chosen solitude can feel so different from forced isolation. Isolation feels like exile. Selective solitude feels like returning home after years of being emotionally overstimulated. It is not empty. It is spacious. It is the first quiet room where your real thoughts can finally sit down. And once you experience that kind of quiet, fake closeness becomes much harder to tolerate. You start noticing things you used to excuse. You notice how certain people only like the version of you that never says no. You notice how some conversations are not conversations at all. They are performances where everyone waits for their turn to be seen. You notice how often you leave interactions feeling heavier instead of more connected. That matters. Your body keeps records. Your mouth has not learned to say out loud yet. The headache after the dinner. the exhaustion after the phone call, the strange relief when plans get canceled. That is not you becoming antisocial. That is information. That is your inner world telling the truth before your identity catches up. And once you start listening, your choices change. You stop calling solitude a problem that needs fixing. You start treating it like a filter. Not everyone deserves access to the version of you that exists without armor. Not everyone has earned the softness they keep expecting from you. Not everyone can handle your quiet without trying to fill it with their own noise. Selective solitude teaches that fast. It teaches you the difference between being wanted and being valued. Being wanted often means you are useful. Being valued means your presence is handled with care. That difference changes everything. Because a lot of people miss you for the wrong reasons. They miss your emotional labor. They miss your listening. They miss how easy you made things for them. But when you pull back, you get to see who misses you as a person. That can be painful. It can also be clarifying. The truth is, solitude reveals more than company ever does. It reveals what your mind sounds like without interruption. It reveals how much of your personality was adaptation. It reveals whether your goals are truly yours or just inherited pressure with better branding. It reveals how often you confuse stimulation with meaning. And yes, at first, that can feel uncomfortable. Because when the noise goes away, buried feelings get louder. Old sadness comes up. Unprocessed anger appears. Memories you outran by staying busy start knocking at the door. That does not mean solitude is harming you. It means silence is finally giving your inner life enough room to speak. A lot of people avoid that moment. They keep themselves constantly occupied because stillness feels exposing. Stillness shows you what distraction has been protecting you from. It shows you the grief beneath your productivity. It shows you the resentment hiding inside your politeness. It shows you how tired you are of being emotionally edited for public consumption. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. That is why selective solitude often changes relationships. You start speaking differently. You stop over-explaining. You stop volunteering your energy where there is no mutual depth. You stop mistaking access for intimacy. And some people will not like that version of you. They will say you changed. They will say you got distant. They will say you used to be more fun. What they usually mean is you used to be easier to reach without responsibility. That is not the same thing as love. Real connection can survive your boundaries. Performative connection usually cannot. That is one of the hardest lessons solitude teaches. The people who only know your agreeable self may feel offended by your peaceful self. Because peace is less available for manipulation. Peace does not chase. Peace does not beg to be included. Peace does not keep proving its worth inside shallow rooms. And when you finally have that kind of peace, you protect it. Not obsessively. Not fearfully. Just wisely. You become more intentional about where your attention goes. You become more selective about what enters your mornings and what lingers in your mind at night. You start honoring your emotional energy like it actually matters. Because it does. Especially if you are the kind of person who feels everything deeply. For sensitive people, constant exposure is not neutral. Every room leaves a mark. Every tone shift gets registered. Every unspoken tension lands somewhere in the body. So solitude is not indulgence. Sometimes it is maintenance. Sometimes it is how a perceptive mind stops itself from drowning in borrowed emotion. That is why the strongest people are not always the loudest. Sometimes the strongest person is the one who knows when to step away. The one who can sit in an empty room without reaching for immediate distraction. The one who can face their own thoughts without running back to noise for relief. The one who would rather be alone than emotionally counterfeit. That kind of strength is quiet. But it is not weak. It is disciplined. It is earned. And it usually comes from learning the hard way what chaos costs. Maybe that is why selective solitude feels almost sacred once you understand it. It is not just time by yourself. It is a refusal to betray your inner life for cheap belonging. It is a decision to stop handing your nervous system to environments that mishandle it. It is a kind of self-respect that does not need an audience. And maybe for the first time, that self-respect feels better than being understood by everyone. Because honestly, everyone was never going to understand you. Some people are only comfortable with simple versions of complex people. Some people need you cheerful because your depth makes them confront their own avoidance. Some people call you too much simply because they were never taught how to hold anything real. That is not your flaw. That is their limit. Selective solitude helps you stop confusing other people's limits with your own unworthiness. That shift can save years of your life. It can save you from begging for reciprocity in places built on emotional convenience. It can save you from staying available to people who only know how to consume you. It can save you from making a personality out of your own overextension. And maybe most importantly, it gives you your inner voice back. The one buried under obligations. The one hidden beneath social reflexes. The one that always knew when something felt off but got ignored for the sake of harmony. When you spend enough time alone, that voice gets stronger. Louder. Clearer. It stops speaking in panic and starts speaking in truth. It tells you who drains you. It tells you what matters. It tells you where you have been living against yourself. And that information is priceless. Because once you know what peace actually feels like, you stop romanticizing confusion. You stop calling emotional inconsistency chemistry. You stop calling overstimulation a social life. You stop calling self-abandonment kindness. You stop calling your own depletion normal. That is the quiet revolution solitude begins. Not a dramatic reinvention. Not a perfect healing arc. Just a more honest relationship with your own energy, needs, and emotional reality. And from that honesty, better choices start forming. You choose fewer people, but you choose them better. You speak less, but you mean more. You disappear more often, but when you return, you're actually present. You become harder to access, but easier to trust. Because now your yes means something. Your attention is no longer automatic. Your warmth is no longer a public resource. It comes from somewhere protected. And protected things tend to stay alive longer. That is another truth people rarely talk about. Solitude does not only reveal who you are, it also helps preserve who you are from environments that slowly erase you. There are places where your spirit starts thinning out. Places where you laugh, participate, respond, and slowly lose contact with yourself anyway. Selective solitude interrupts that process. It gives you a chance to come back before your own life starts feeling unfamiliar. So if you have been choosing distance lately, do not rush to shame yourself. Look closer. Maybe you are not withdrawing from life. Maybe you are withdrawing from noise that kept disguising itself as life. Maybe your mind is not becoming colder. Maybe it is becoming more accurate. Maybe being alone is not your fear anymore. Maybe being surrounded by people who cannot feel you is. And that changes the whole story. Because the goal was never constant connection. The goal was real connection. The kind that does not leave you exhausted for being honest. The kind that does not punish your quiet. The kind that lets your nervous system unclench instead of stay alert. Until that arrives, your solitude is not empty space. It is intelligent space. It is protective space. It is the space where your identity stops performing and starts breathing again. So no, choosing to be alone is not always a sign something is wrong. Sometimes it is the clearest sign that something inside you is finally getting stronger. You are no longer starving for company at the expense of yourself. You are no longer volunteering for emotional environments that charge too much for too little warmth. You are learning that peace is not a consolation prize. It is a standard. And once peace becomes your standard, selective solitude stops looking lonely. It starts looking like power. The kind of power that does not need to announce itself. The kind of power that quietly changes your entire life from the inside. Because the moment you stop fearing your own company, other people's approval loses its grip. And that may be the greatest strength you will ever build.